Hey guys, what's up? This is Bucket Ponds, and my name is Terry. I seek to enlighten, entertain, and encourage you to start your own projects. Today I'm doing an update video on one of the jar aquariums that we built a while back. I will include a link to the build video in the description, of course. But in this tank we have tons of Paramecium. It's insane. I didn't plan on making this video, but I looked at the tank today. It looks so great, I have to share it with you. So let's jump right in. Please remember to like and subscribe. It helps me out a lot. It doesn't cost you anything, and it keeps me motivated, and it ensures that we'll have more videos in the future. After this, I have part 2 for the detritus worm culture, showing you how to raise them, talking about care and feeding, and looking at the tank as it's progressed over time. I'm sure you'll love it. So let's jump right into our Nano Aquarium update. Alright guys, so you may remember this jar. We built it a while back, and it's been running pretty well since then. We included a small Tupperware container placed inside of the jar, full of dirt and stones and some sand to act as a plant pot. And we added a small Tupperware container on top of that as well to kind of seal in the humidity. So then any evaporation from this jar went right into this plant pot. There are some holes in the bottom for the water to transfer through it and whatnot. But the container has worked out really well, and the jar aquarium has just really surprised me. Here I'm just removing the lid. You can see the condensation in there, the humidity. And we planted this small pot on top with Creeping Jenny, and it worked really well. The Creeping Jenny, some of it wilted, but that's natural. You can see the humidity there had formed inside of the jar, and that's great. We didn't lose any water from evaporation in this project, but the Creeping Jenny has done pretty good. There is a little wilting, but we have a lot of green leaves and some new growth, and it's almost ready to make more cuttings soon. So that's pretty cool, and I'm very happy with it. Creeping Jenny is pretty easy to work with, and it's just fun to see, fun to play with. Your fish will actually eat it. I've had my guppies just completely destroy Creeping Jenny plants. It's also called moneywort. It has different names. But here it's growing, in a dry land setup inside of our, which is what is essentially is a terrarium placed on top of the jar aquarium here. I've kind of combined them. But the real star of the show here is the aquarium, not so much the terrarium on top. But you see that mass in the middle? That's what remains of a cucumber slice that I fed these guys a few days ago. You can see quite a few bladder snails and a few pond snails as well. But if you look closely, you'll see a massive army of Paramecium. Yes, a swarm. There's thousands of them in here, and they're extremely active. They're always moving, they're flowing around, forming strange waterfalls and like structures of their own. They're very interesting creatures, and I'm very happy to have them. It sounds strange, but this sort of thing is pretty common in my aquariums. In my jar projects, unless I specifically, work to prevent Paramecium, we have quite a few. And anyone struggling to raise these creatures, I feel very bad for you. It's not hard. Once you get started, and once you can provide the things that they need to survive, then they do really, really well, apparently. They breed and replicate so quickly, it's insane. Now the video may be a bit dark, but I wanted to make sure that you could see the Paramecium there, especially in the lower portion. There's just thousands of them. It's amazing. These creatures make excellent food for small fish, and I can just take a pipette and, extract some of them and then add them to my other aquariums. The fish go nuts, they devour them. They're very useful little creatures. And yeah, I have a great deal of fun watching them flow and create these waterfall effects all throughout the tank. It's just so interesting to me. This tank was pretty much like a fire and forget project. I built it, I put it on the windowsill, and yeah, I just stopped, worrying about it so much. I feed them about once a week with a slice of cucumber. But other than that, the tank requires no maintenance, no water changes, no work at all. It's planted with some small amount of duckweed and a pretty good helping of my Nutella macroalgae, which acts as a filter and, processes all the waste in the aquarium. We can see quite a few snails in here as well. The bioload is pretty high for such a small jar, and it works. We have a little bit of algae growth, but that's okay. That's pretty normal, and nothing to worry about. These Paramecium are just so interesting to me. There's just the density of life in this aquarium is astounding. You know, this is a very basic project, really. I mean, when we put this together, you can see everything in the build video that went into this tank, and it came out so well. Now, I am recording this voiceover on my lunch break at my day job near a very large pond, and actually near a large swamp as well. So you might hear some crickets chirping and some sounds in the background. I hope that doesn't bother you too much. You'll have to forgive me if the audio quality isn't perfect. But we're not really here to listen to me talk, you know, we're here to look at the Paramecium. Here we have a piece of duckweed that's actually sinking to the bottom. It's been overloaded with a little bit of algae, a ton of Paramecium, and some ostracods roosting on it. And they seem to be eating the algae as well, which is pretty good. But this is something you may have seen in my older aquariums, where the duckweed will sort of rain down as ostracods perch upon it. And once they let go, it will float back to the surface and repeat the process. And we also have some of our small Tubaflex worms here. You may have seen them in a recent video I posted, where they had some kind of new growth on their bodies. It's hard to explain, but they don't seem to be showing that here. So it's pretty interesting. They don't have that sort of fan or hood type growth on their bodies this time. So they are the same worms, though. I can say that much. Now, these are not our small detritus worms. These are some kind of Tubaflex or some kind of aquatic earthworm. And they're in here as well, just not in the extreme dense numbers that our Paramecium have achieved. And yeah, this is pretty common for most of my projects. I have, you know, unless I specifically set out to avoid the Paramecium swarm, they will show up in my tanks. And it's nothing to worry about. You know, they're not harmful as far as I can tell. I mean, apparently the life inside of this jar is doing really well. The snails are doing fine. Everything's doing pretty good. So I don't think the Paramecium have any kind of negative impact on the ecosystem. I think they empower it. But we do need to introduce some kind of predator that will consume them. That's my ultimate goal in future projects. Not fish, but something else. Now I'm going to speed the footage up here just a little bit so you can get a better idea of the movement of these creatures. There are so many of them in here. And you know, once again, I use these for fish food, pretty much, and also their effect in the small ecosystem. They seem to eat just about anything they can. I do have a small bit of algae that's growing in here unintentionally that's not being consumed, so I don't think that they directly eat algae. But I'm willing to bet that they can consume bacteria, and I know for a fact that they can eat cucumber slices, one way or another. I'm not too sure about their anatomy, but they're basically shaped like tiny footballs, and I'm willing to bet they have some small appendages that allow them to move so freely throughout the water. Alright guys, before we go, I want to take a moment to talk about the biofilter we have here. This is Nutella macroalgae. It's a freshwater macroalgae, and I love it to death. I grow it in my farm tank, and most of these jar aquariums are basically small versions of my farm tank. It's a large 30-gallon tank with no water changes in like 2 years and some fish and all kinds of stuff. It's great. But the Nutella does a really great job of filtering out the water and just providing tons of surface area for beneficial bacteria. And it actually contains blue-green algae as well. Cyanobacteria grows on the Nutella. You may remember my experiments years ago where we were battling against the Nutella macroalgae, and we managed to beat it naturally. But in the process, we experimented with Paramecium and jar aquariums and blue-green algae, and we learned that the Paramecium can survive a blue-green algae bloom. And I believe that in one way or another, they are acting as a control mechanism. I believe they are acting as a control mechanism to prevent the blue-green algae blooms. Now, I could be wrong, but that's just my working theory. Now, I have seen others online showing how to raise Paramecium, and they'll basically put a bunch of poo water in a jar, and it's very nasty. But I want to show you that you don't have to do something like that. You can run a beautiful planted aquarium. It might look a little funny, but it's a model of a pond. You know, it's an ecosystem in a jar. And you can harvest from this ecosystem as needed. You can take snails and paramecium and all your creatures that you want to use elsewhere as live food for your other pets, or, you know, to start new tanks. You don't have to run some dirty, nasty thing to make this happen. So I believe that you should work with nature whenever possible, and don't try to fight against it. You know, we're not in a laboratory, we're not going to have a monoculture. Well, alright guys, that's a look at the Nano Aquarium that we built a while back. I hope that you enjoyed the video. We have thousands of paramecium in this little jar. It's great. I love it so much. Um, there's nothing to it really. Once you get started with this stuff, once you just learn by doing, you can raise paramecium like this very easily. Detritus worms, bladder snails, all of these creatures, they're very easy to work with once you understand them. And I can never fully explain everything. It's better to just learn by doing, practice. But that was the update video. I hope that you enjoy it. Please remember to like and subscribe. And my next video will be part 2 for the detritus worm how-to culture. So I'm Terry. This is Bucket Ponds. I hope you enjoy the video, and I'll see you next time.